We've gone through the journey to reveal the planes. We've done a comprehensive review of what each plane card does. So now we can finally round out our preparations for Grand Prix Halls of Valor with a discussion of some of the many possible ways to configure plane decks for your strategies this coming month. As always, there are links in the description below for your key resources to check out all things Revolution Custom Standard, such as the Custom Magic Discord server where you can get updates about and play the format against others, as well as check out all of the cool cards and sets that others in the community are designing. The Revolution Compendium, where you can look through all of the cards the curators recommend for consideration in your decks, sorted by card roles. And Manifesto, our dedicated Scryfall-like engine that lets you search through cards from sets currently in the format. Before we dive into the plane packages and how to build with them in mind, a few bits of housekeeping. First and foremost, as of recording, decklist submissions for the 16 competitors in the 4th annual Revolution World Championship are nearing a close. While I won't be covering majority of that tournament here, you can expect to see a video running through all 16 competitors and the decks they're bringing in more detail soon. And also, expect a commentary video covering the finals match at the very least. Additionally, today, April 7th, brought with it a monumental announcement for the future of Revolution in celebration of 4 years of the format. Tentatively moving forward, May rotations will bring 2 sets into the format as opposed to the usual 1, to eventually push us up to 8 total sets in the pool at any given time, away from the usual 6. This comes with a shifting of the balance philosophy to gradually push the power level to be more congruent with official standard format guidelines, such as relaxing on earlier mana acceleration, cheaper wrath effects, and so on. The full effect of these changes will be rather gradual for the most part, but the most immediate visible effect will be 2 full sets entering the field in just over 3 weeks, meaning you all have 2 full sets worth of card reviews headed your way here on the channel as soon as I know what's coming into the field. So look forward to both of those. Finally, as before, it's important to make sure we're all on the same page about how planes all work. This tournament will be with the usual Revolution standard card pool and normal deck building rules for a 1v1 match in the GQ Chaos Reigns season. However, you'll also need to include a list of 10 to 15 unique plane cards to be shuffled together with your opponent's choices during each round. During gameplay, you'll begin the game on a plane chosen at random from the combined deck after mulligans have concluded, and can roll the planar die as a sorcery for 0 mana, plus 1 additional for each time you've already rolled in any given turn. The base effects of each plane usually apply to all players, meaning any that accrue value for you do so for your opponent as well, and any that harm your opponent can hurt you too. The planar die is a d6 modified with a 1 in 6 chance of rolling to planeswalk and a 1 in 6 chance to cause chaos to ensue. When you planeswalk, the current plane is returned to the deck and a new plane is drawn at random, with Lackeybot handling the planar deck for all players during this GP. When chaos ensues, you perform the action noted on the current plane, often providing an effect for you specifically, but sometimes affecting all players or even the plane itself. Importantly, starting the game on a plane does not count as planeswalking for the purposes of any effects that check for that, but any upkeep triggers will occur on the first turn of the game. Alrighty, with all of that out of the way, we are done with the scripted portion of the video, and we can talk about what this format looks like, how the planes modify deck building, and really get into some of the funkiness that we have in this current field. So, there are some weird things kicking around in current Revolution. Lots of things that people are interested in trying, but there hasn't been a whole lot of momentum in actually trying many of these planes going into this GP, in part because a lot of the competitors who could participate in this GP are also busy preparing for Worlds. But there have been a few decks that have arrived in deck lists and a few other ideas that have been kicking around, so I'm going to try and go over some of the specific things that have cropped up so far, and then we can start talking about more general theory and ideology. I'll do what I can to try and timestamp those in the description, so if there's a specific strategy that you are interested in, check the timestamps so you can kind of navigate this a little more cleanly. And we're starting off with perhaps one of the craziest strategies available in the field, which is built around Tower of the Tech Magi. Dr. Chipmunk piloted this to, I believe, a 5-0 deck list finish using an instant sorcery Spellslingery strategy built around Savvy Smith and Lightspeed Launcher with, of course, Aqua Crew Flagship and a bunch of cheap flashback spells. and burn to try and just generate as much value as possible, with a few spicier includes here, such as a 1 of Blistering Cryo Phoenix, a 1 of Keranos, and 4 copies of Covetous Frostworm. Now, this might look a little similar to the deck that I played in the GP last month, but trust me, there are a lot of things that are a lot more appealing about this strategy. Blistering Cryo Phoenix, as the 1 of, can do some infinite loops with Tower of the Tech Magi. If you arrive on this plane, casting an instant or sorcery will untap a permanent you control and give it haste. If you have one of your 1 mana flashback spells, be that Igneous Visions or Industrialize, you can repeatedly cast that over and over and over again with Blistering Cryo Phoenix, letting the exile part of your flashback put it to your hand instead, and then untap the land that you used to pay for that over and over to effectively build up infinite storm count. While this can't build up infinite mana, you could theoretically try to planeswalk and find 4th Street on that same turn, and then just kill your opponent. Very inconsistent, but there's a combo-y strategy to be had there. Realistically, though, a lot of the spike potential of this deck comes from Covetous Frostworm. If this can come down on turn 1, this is a huge problem for your opponent. This Ward 1 is a headache for your opponent to deal with, and there is so much value to be had from having Frostworm be this value engine. Every time you cast an instant sorcery, you get to get the instants and sorceries you mill off the top to your hand, and if you don't mill an instant or sorcery, you just get to keep growing this dragon, so it's more and more of a problem. And again, if you can get this down on turn 1, this ward cost is a real headache for your opponent. And of course, you have Veda's Club, which can spectacle your cards to cast them for 2 less, meaning you can cast Covetous Frostworm for 1, cast Aqua Crew Flagship for 1, cast not necessarily High Voltage, but you could I actually don't think you can surface Seafloor Treasures either, but you could cast Face of the Phoenix for 1. In theory, if High Voltage is your first instant or sorcery, you could cast High Voltage for 1. Cast Savvy Smith for 1, but you can also, use Sanjura Raceway. Your second spell each turn costs 2 less. You can Karsi's Spine. Karsi's Spine is the big one because it lets your Covetous Frostworm cost 1 mana without giving your opponent a ton of value, and it is a plane that, because it is so good with your Covetous Frostworm, heavily incentivizes your opponent to try and get away from it as soon as possible, which can potentially tie up some of their early mana. There's also some artifact generation. You've got Jericho's Abandoned Office here, Remains of Morig Moor, sort of just like trinket generation. Den of the First Dream can do some really powerful things with Blistering Cryo Phoenix as well. By giving all of your instant sorceries flashback, you can do the Cryo Phoenix loop, and just every time you pay a red, you get to Firebolt. So you can just deal twice as much damage to your opponent as you have red mana to spend. And then just cast a bunch of instants and sorceries in the process. Coyer Station plays very nicely with the instants that you have. Bora Depths, from what I have heard from Chipmunk, is probably one of the weaker cards in the plane list here. You've also got stuff like Before the Chasmal Rift, play cards from your graveyard, get your Eldrazi spawn to give you more mana to play your cards. So there's a lot of things to like. Kaiwan Testing Grounds, just really playing off of the Spellslinger stuff. Mishiro Town helping you hit your early land drops. Prismatic Pool, generating you some card advantage as you use your burn, your damaging spells against blue or white creatures. Veilgate can fill your graveyard for your flashback synergies. So there's a lot of little cute internal synergies here to like. One of the big things we're going to get into, though, as we go through all of this is one of the biggest lingering questions going into this tournament is how many planes is the right number of planes? And I think it is going to really depend on what planes are important to you, whether it is a category of planes or whether it is specific planes that matter to you. And I think the specificity of certain planes being very important to your strategy is something you really do want to key in on. I think Tower of Tech Magi, Kaiwan's Testing Grounds, Den of the First Dream are all really, really valuable pieces of this strategy. Karsi's Spine, also very powerful. Sanjura Raceway, Veda's Club, also something like Setessa could be very good for this strategy. And with all of those planes being very important, one could say, you want to play 15 planes so you can try and get as many of your planes into the pool as possible so you have a maximized chance of hitting a plane you care about. But the funky part of how math works is the more planes that you play, the less likely you are to hit a specific plane that you're playing. So, if you were trying to go all in on Blistering Cryo Phoenix with Tower of the Tech Magi, you might not want to play 15 planes because even if your opponent's on 15, there's a pretty big difference between Tower being a 1 in 30 over it being a 1 in 25. And if your opponent is on Tower as well, say you and your opponent are both on Tower, and to maximize the chances of finding Tower, you both play 10 planes, suddenly that's a 2 in 20. You have a 10% chance of finding Tower of the Tech Magi as just your starting plane. That's a monumental difference for trying to find particular planes or particular packages of planes. So one of the things that I think I want to encourage you to consider when building your plane package is think about how many planes are necessary for the strategy that you're building versus how many planes are just good incidental bonuses. And if you're fine just getting these incidental bonuses and you think your deck's strength alone can really carry, then 15 planes might be the safe direction, but do not write off just being on 10 planes. Even if your opponent's on 15 planes, yes, they do get to have more of their important planes in their deck than in the planar deck than you do. But there is still value to having fewer planes of your own to maximize the odds of hitting particular planes that you might really care about. So moving on from something like this to the other of the current entries in the deck lists channel is Abzan Advisors, courtesy of Laurel. This one is pretty sweet, honestly. This is kind of a like semi-mill deck, doing some self-mill, some graveyard strategies, but also just being like a mid-rangey aggro deck that's like trying to just put a bunch of creatures into play and turn sideways, but can still get some value out of slowing the game down a little bit. We have 2 Unflinching Titan, 4 Root Fossils, got Shattered Throne to do some funky things, whether it's just milling your opponent out over time, or milling your own deck and then paying mana to copy up the creatures that are going to your graveyard, and it is from anywhere. So as your creatures die on the battlefield, you can pay mana to get copies of them as well. Shattered Throne, not having really seen a whole lot of play up to this point, but from what I've heard from Laurel, this card is very real. And then you've got defensive tools like Getaway Proxy and Milan and Wistful Delegate. You have Grassroots Campaigners and Corrupt Congressmen to leverage the fact that you have multiple planes that can create a click token, so you don't actually have to worry about the first enter trigger making a pledge actually just making an enchantment. You can get value from them more immediately. You've got Synod of Sanctions as a bit of removal in the main, Yeji as some recursive value, and then Bind Life to Steal as more recursive value to couple with Yeji and with the Shattered Throne. Seems like a very, very resilient, potent creature strategy, and I believe this went 4-1 in the league and was the first deck list to actually go up for this Planechase season. So if you're looking to do something more creature-focused, I think value is something you really do want to be cognizant of. Value generation is going to be very powerful here going into this field. Having ways to outvalue your opponent seem particularly important if you're trying to play the value plan, because a lot of folks seem like they're leaning towards the value plan in some capacity. So having ways to beat them out on that vector seem pretty critical. And so this is a deck that provides a solid example of a 10-plane strategy. So you've got things like Castle Stellia to tax out your opponents, data channels to set up that pledge, Foundation Headquarters to get a bit of mill going, Gravelgate Underpass, more pledging, lower Techian, kind of trying to punish opponents for drawing too many cards or, having things they're discarding out of their hand, which can also be good to punish with Corrupt Congressman, making your opponent discard. Mokar Valley, getting a lot of value out of the 29 creatures in the main deck with, granted 11 of them already only cost 1 mana, but Mokar Valley, discounting 18 cards is still pretty good. And, I believe the surface cost on Root Fossil counts as casting a creature. check me in the comments on that if you know that I'm wrong, but I believe that may also work with Mokar Valley. Remembrance Tower milling each player whenever creatures die, and also having a way to get creatures back from your graveyard if you roll Chaos. Ruins of Elantine, letting you copy up, say, your Unflinching Titans or your Grassroots Campaigners or your Getaway Proxies. Or even just something as simple as copying up your Surfaced Reborn Lily or your Shattered, not necessarily your Shattered Throne, but like, copying up your permanents over time. Test Site Syzygy, also getting you your Make a Pledge, and then the Broken Field, letting your creatures have Persist if they've attacked, so you can attack more safely with no fear of your board getting, completely sabotaged if they fully get that attack through. And then, of course, with some of your recursive synergies, yes, Melon might die from having Persist, but you can get away proxy your creatures back to kind of clear the -1/-1 counters. Same with Congressman, Grassroots Campaigners. You don't really mind getting them back with -1/-1 counters because they do valuable things when they enter. Same with Getaway Proxy to an extent. Same with Synod of Sanctions. Unflinching Titan does something very similar. So there's a lot to like about all of this. And then, of course, the AG wants you to attack with at least 3 creatures, so Broken Fields makes doing so a little bit safer. I have heard that some of these sideboard cards didn't really come up too much, particularly Heartbreak was not too impressive, but it was definitely something that was just like trying to get more wraths in the sideboard alongside Chronicle of Extinction. Might benefit to have more graveyard hate in the sideboard here, like getting some number of Soul Guide Lanterns, but otherwise, this is a pretty solid strategy. Laurel, of course, the champion of advisor decks in general. So lots to appreciate here with this strategy as well. And then, of course, you have things like Dragon Age. Other tried and tested decks in the field can really just put to use a solid plane package if you can pull together the right one. So this is the list that Viola played in GP Whitecliff back in February, 1-to-1, just with adding in a plane package, 15 planes here. Not a perfect plane package, but just sort of a cursory thought of, what are 15 planes that could be beneficial for this kind of deck, this kind of strategy. And not everything here is perfect. There could be some worthwhile changes to be made, trying to shift what planes are being played here. But, the solid basic strategy of, gubernatorial fundraiser, sustainable investments, Iviana and Dante all generating you additional sources of mana. You have Get Your Wish with a bunch of multicolored permanents, Golden Age helping fix your mana. And then eventually getting you some value out of your graveyard because you have so many multicolored spells. You get 4 of Liquidate, you get 4 of Coup d'etat. Some of the most unconditional removal and one of the best cheap sweepers we have. Abominable Avalanche is just huge here. And then Iviana can just pick up more win conditions for you out of your sideboard. So lots to love on the baseline here. And then one of the things that this deck can really leverage is you get all of these planes to generate more value. You get, say, Gold Peak Gateway to get your pledging up, and you can pledge Vishanki and generate mana sooner. And of course, if you start on Gold Peak Gateway, your gubernatorial fundraiser makes you a treasure immediately. Same with Gravelgate Underpass, same with Test Site Syzygy. Kina City Market really benefits from you being able to spend a lot of mana on things like Iviana and Dante. And some of your dragons for your sideboard. Karsi Spine discounts Dante, discounts your sideboard dragons. Kambul, just a nice sort of protective tool. Buy yourself a little bit of time as you are wandering the plains. Or punish your opponent for wandering for a specific plane by making it so they can't really kill you until their next turn, buying you a turn that way. Mishiro Town helping fix your mana with this being a 4-color deck. New Telison can just start generating you some value by generating card advantage, and with this being such a high mana generation deck, paying the 7 for your evil plan isn't that big of a hindrance. You get Ruins of Missing Notes to really punish graveyard strategies by force exiling everything that dies as it dies with things like Coup d'etat. Ruins of Elantine to just optionally copy up your treasures at the end of your turn, or you can pay 2 mana, copy up a gubernatorial fundraiser, pay 3 mana, copy up a sustainable investments if you really just want to have some additional insurance there, or even pay more mana if you want to copy up, say, a malicious Skycleaver, or even just like a chief executive Dante, or maybe you sideboarded in Sifting Through Soot and want to get more copies of that. Satessa can help you play some of your bigger spells early. Starfowl Glade can flicker your gubernatorial fundraiser, flicker your Dante, flicker your investments or Golden Age, even reset the loyalty on your Iviana if you need it to. Silenced Court can just be sort of a hard sweeper to buy yourself some time. And if your creatures are coming back, all of your big dragons don't mind getting the -1/-1 counter because they all have really important things if they can come back when you leave. Thorn Chapel, just buying yourself a bit more time against most decks not able to really attack through Thorn Chapel, forcing your opponent to spend more time and more resources trying to dig through and flip to Planeswalk. And then, of course, Uxie Wilds, benefiting by having treasure generation, counter generation to buff up your creatures, and the chaos ability not being that impactful because the deck usually doesn't have too many creatures in play. So you're almost never really sacrificing something important. You might be sacrificing like a gubernatorial fundraiser, but for the most part, you're usually just getting to keep a Dante, and your opponent has to sacrifice some creatures if chaos gets flipped here. So this is a good example of a deck that hasn't really, to my knowledge, been too tested in this Planechase field, but there's a lot of planes that you can really get some value out of with this kind of strategy and kind of push this idea to its limits. So hopefully this gives you a basic idea of how to leverage individual strategies that are known quantities, or like modify strategies with these planes in mind. So now we're going to kind of shift into something a little bit more generic, take a look at a couple more simplistic strategies and how we can adapt each of those with planes. And we're going to start off with tokens. All right, so tokens here, just another deck that already has put up some decent results. This is Cat in Tree's Penwrath tokens deck from last month, GP Petrasia, top 8 performing deck. EO may be a little risky in a field that might be more inclined towards big token generation, but I think EO is still pretty good, especially if you're just making a bunch of tokens, and especially if a lot of the planes that you're on don't necessarily make a ton of tokens for your opponent. The 3/3s you give your opponent aren't going to be hurt too much by you just making way more. So this kind of shell, just put a lot of tokens into play. You get Solidarity tokens off of Edgeland Pledge. And then otherwise you just, try and generate tokens off of Harmony of Nature, Flags on High, Sparks of Revolution, Penwrath Agenda, Abominable Avalanche, The Ruins Awaken. Just kind of fill up the board and push as much as you possibly can to your opponent's face. And then, with a strategy like this, I think if you are on a more aggressive strategy, you are better off trying to identify 15 planes that are good for you, just to try and drown out any important things that your opponent might get. Because you get things like the Tugay and Zolo's Ring that are just a monumental amount of damage, especially early on, and can really put your opponent in a tricky spot rather quickly. But of course, also has the complication of, you need to be able to not just be losing to this on your opponent's side of the board. And if you're, flooding the board with a bunch of tokens, it can be easier to just chump block the 4/4s off of Tugay, or, chump block the 3/3s off of Zolo's Ring over time. But you also, as a token deck, get to leverage things like the 5 Thorn Maw, the Bastion d'Orlais, and Gore Sand, which I'll just push a bunch of damage. You can play a pledge package with Data Channels, Gold Peak Gateway, and Gravelgate Underpass, all pledging to Hazak to make the 2/2s with Decayed turn after turn. You can get other good token generation cards like Green Glade Campsite and Butani Pass. You can play things like Halls of Valor to punish your opponent for blocking your smaller creatures and piling these auras up onto other creatures you control to make them more threatening. You can use Ruins of Elantine to copy up your Flags on High or your Harmonies with Nature or your Magma Flows, or even copy up a Solidarity token off of Edgeland Pledge. Tambara Totem Forest can protect one of your important enchantments, like a flipped Sparks of the Revolution or a Harmony with Nature, or especially protect an EO. You can do the crossroads, just leverage, wider border creature types to push more damage. Acros can push more damage as well. Um, so there's a lot to like about trying to play a more aggressive strategy. If folks are looking to try and get really dirtily, then aggressive strategies have some inherent benefit just by virtue of, forcing your opponent to not really have a whole lot of time to mess around and putting them under the pressure of needing to figure out what to do right then and there. And of course, as your planes threaten your opponent's life total, that puts them between having to deal with your current board state and having to deal with the plane they're currently on. So the more planes you have that can actually actively put pressure on them, the better, meaning you might even want to look at things like getting to play Eltenzia's Toll, just trying to find more ways of pushing damage to your opponent's face to put them under fire to a greater degree. If you're looking to do maybe a little more mid-rangey, go over the top of some of these aggressive decks and try and beat down these control decks a little bit more. You can do something like this. This is a deck of my own brewing, really trying to leverage the planes that we currently have. Not running the 15, rather running the 10, because 5 of these planes are the Nylon Clique planes, and pledging with these is very important to this strategy. So identify two cliques that are really important to you, and then try and push into one of those two cliques, depending on where you're at in the game. The Penwrath one in particular is really good because it gives you red and white for your approval, because this deck has a whole lot of different moving parts, such as the approval creatures of Chromagoyf and Judge, Jury, and Executioner, has the Titans, Unflinching Titan and Unspeaking Titan, has a weather package even with Weather Elemental and Gloomy Meteorologist to get one each of Falling Ashes, Sea Breeze, and Rain Dance. Ideally trying to get Rain Dance into play so that way you can copy up your grassroots campaigners, your meteorologists, your congressmen, your Chromagoyfs, your Kappas, all your creatures getting just more value as you attack with them turn after turn. And then, trying to squeeze some value in here through particularly Prismatic Pool. This does not care about who's the owner or the controller of the thing that's being targeted, just as long as the spell and the target are different colors. So you can Final Fate your opponent's green creature or white creature and draw a card, or ensconce your own blue creature or your own black creature and draw a card. So that kind of works well when you have these aggressive tools like Unspeaking Titan and Carefree Kappa and Judge, Jury, Executioner, Corrupt Congressman to have ensconce targets that also get to generate value off of Prismatic Pool. Ruins of Elantian getting to, just on a baseline, make token copies of, say, something like Looks Like Rain off of Carefree Kappa, or maybe you can make token copies of Falling Ashes out of your sideboard, make token copies of, depending on what clique you may have chosen, maybe you're making treasures off of Vishanki, or making 2/2 Decayed minions off of Hazak, and so you can use Ruins of Elantian to copy those. Can copy up the tokens, the Golem tokens off of Unspeaking and Unflinching Titan. Can even copy up your Gloomy Meteorologists or your Weather Elementals. Just, if you're willing to pay a little bit more mana for Ruins, it can be very nice. You get Sanjara Raceway, which can really benefit from how many of your 3-drops are 2 and a single colored pip. Almost all of these bigger cards do get to leverage Sanjara Raceway pretty well. Get 1 mana Unflinching Titans, 1 mana Corrupt Congressmen, 1 mana Meteorologists or Grassroots Campaigners, 2 mana for a Weather Elemental or a Judge, Jury, Executioner or a Carefree Kappa. Really just kind of leveraging Sanjara Raceway, and to a similar extent, you can leverage Setessa pretty well with that. You can leverage Veda's Club pretty well with that. So yeah, you get to kind of just run a few of the cost cheating tools, all 5 of the pledge cliques, and then you get to run Ruins of Elantian and Prismatic Pool as some just additional value generation, and otherwise kind of just approval stompy deck that may not get to exist outside of this pool, purely thanks to the reliability of these pledge planes, giving you more ways to try and get your approval up early. Because, just going down a hypothetical of, say you get to start on Gold Peak Gateway turn 1, and you choose to pledge to Hazek Scylla make 2/2 minions turn after turn. Turn 2 Chromagoyf is already a 4/4, and that is monumental for pushing damage with Chromagoyf quickly. And your Judge, Jury, Executioner immediately, if you go for Penwrath to buff up your creatures turn after turn, then Penwrath plus Judge, Jury, and Executioner is for removing any creature mana value 4 or less. So there's just, I think, a lot of things to love with a approval style deck like this. Admittedly, this is a strategy that I have my eyes on going into this field. Something that's very exciting to me in particular. And then one last kind of major archetype we can talk about is Control, but we're going to kind of cheat a little bit and talk about something more mill-oriented rather than specifically Control. So this is not necessarily a complete deck by any means, but this was just sort of a loose idea of another way to take the Pledge package, leveraging these cliques, specifically leveraging Skycrest Estates. I do have all of them in here. So you can try and lean into different cliques depending on what strategy you're on. So this one, I believe, the idea is you either choose Tyrell to surveil or Vishanki to make treasures, depending on where you're at, and then you can use that mana or that surveilling to try and fill your graveyard for root fossils. Get Scothas into your graveyard. You can use Tough Nut to pay for Scotha or pay for root fossil, or pay for spells off of Cryptolab. And then Tough Nut can also pay to spin the planar die. That's also true of Cryptolab. And then these can also pay for just paying to pay the 4 to pledge again. And then you get the Corrupt Congressmen, you get the Grassroots Campaigners, you can leverage off the cost reduction effects that your opponents might be running. You can get those back with a Scotha, Titan of Eternal Dark. Ballot Registrar can be really good with all of these, discounting the root fossils. Activated ability, discounting the cost to pledge as well. And then one of the big things that was on my radar as well, I'm calling this sort of more of a mill deck as opposed to this being a mid-range control deck, because there's these mill Remembrance Tower, Mysterious Ruin, the Underworld, Foundation Headquarters, but one of the big ones is Den of the First Dream. One of the things that was really on my radar with Den of the First Dream is Chronicle of Extinction and the other Chronicles. So Chronicle of Extinction, because it cares that it has its flashback cost paid to choose 3 modes, Den of the First Dream with a Chronicle in your graveyard means that you can pay 2 black to choose 3 modes from among Chronicle of Extinction. This is a card that we have seen in Constructed is game-ending if you're able to pay 9 for it. And so now imagine you have Den of the First Dream out and you get to Chronicle for 4 mana on the flashback, or Chronicle of Precedence for 3 mana and mill your opponent for 21 for only 3 mana, or you get to Chronicle of Precedence, copy 3 Corrupt Congressmen's, and torment your opponent 3 times, or copy Cryptolab to draw more cards and generate a bunch more mana, or you can just Chronicle for 3 to draw 6. Lots of things to really like about some of the internal synergies here. You can kind of do some self-mill, milling out your opponent with Chronicle of Precedence, giving yourself some additional ways of fighting that. And just to pay respect to folks who wanted an actual control deck, let's take a look at what control could look like with a shell like this. All right, one last control deck here, or one last deck here. Another one pulled from a recent performance. This one being Zangi's second place white-blue control list back in GP Whitecliff in February. The heavy base white deck trying to leverage Fall of Atlantean as an instant speed 4-mana sweeper, alongside just some of the best counter magic, hard counter spells we have in the format right now. And just otherwise good card selection and interaction. You get to play Sealaways, Omen of Deceptions, Gone Pickens, Benthelos, which has been changed since that GP. So it's a little more awkward now, but does also get to cast your copies, so could potentially leverage anything that might care about casting multiple spells in a turn, perhaps. Shengfa also changed from then, but also might be a little bit better in some respects, depending on how you are trying to approach Shengfa. One of the things that I think is really important here is talking about that whole, do you run 10 or do you run 15 planes. And I think for something like Control, you really do want 15 planes if you're taking things slower, just because the aggressive planes are so brutal that having a way to minimize the number of aggressive planes your opponent can roll into, or rather maximize the times when your opponent isn't rolling into an aggressive plane, can be really valuable for just making sure you have the time to get rolling. But you can also use planes as a way to mitigate the lack of win conditions. You can run things like Kaiwan's testing grounds, with the 15, I believe, sorceries or 15 instants that you have in the deck, or it might be 18. Just a moment. I am tabbing over to see 18 instance. So yeah, you get 18 instance. You can leverage that with Kaiwan's testing grounds. You get Kochiba port, which can make your instance and your flash spells cost 1 less on your opponent's turn. Make the spell you cast off of Benthelos cheaper. You can play some of the pledges. You can play specifically the ones that are in Esper, so you can get the Tyrell pledge and surveil more reliably. Korgan Oz in Command, giving you more card selection on your turn. Coyer Station being another thing that can help mitigate the lack of win conditions by just generating a bunch of 2/2s as you're casting spells on your opponent's turn by turn. Mishra Town can help fix some mana. Prismatic Pool can draw you cards as you're countering your opponent's red and green spells, or using like To the Last Breath or Tyranny of Tracks on your opponent's black or red spells. Remains of Morig Moor can just sort of give you some glyphs to give you more card selection as you draw cards turn by turn. Golden Palace, as you gain life or draw cards, can stun down your opponent's permanents. And then you can also, if you're rolling the dice yourself, you can draw cards and gain life to try and stabilize a little bit more. You get the Silenced Court and Thorn Chapel as ways to shut down opposing creature decks and try and buy yourself more time. And you can even run something like the Source Chamber to get to play some of your sideboard cards, so you can try and get more access to things like the Fall of Tracks out of the sideboard, more copies of Tyranny of Tracks, another Shengfa, Looming Psyhawk, and Soul Guide Lantern out of the sideboard as need be. So hopefully this has helped with giving you a basic idea of how you can sort of combine these different planes, whether you want to run the low plane count of 10 to try and maximize finding specific planes out of your portion of the deck, or run the 15, whether it is to maximize the chance that you roll into one of your own planes, or minimize the chance that you run into one of your opponents. Having these options and this flexibility, I think planes add a really interesting vector for deck building that adds some meaningful complexity. And with this, external potential for value engine, token generations, it opens up this question of what are you willing to leave out of your main deck, because you now can include planes to do so without you ever having to quote unquote draw your specific planes from your main deck of 60 cards. It frees you up to be more forgiving with what cards you include in your deck, what cards you leave out of your deck, because you can now use planes to mitigate some of your weaknesses or enhance some of your strengths. So hopefully this is giving you some things to think about. There is very little time left to register for Grand Prix Halls of Valor. So if you are interested, information in the description below. Check out the Discord server and sign up for Grand Prix Halls of Valor before it is too late. I believe Tuesday at midnight Eastern Standard Time. I'm going to confirm that real quick. Tuesday at midnight Eastern Standard Time, as it rolls into Wednesday, is going to be the submission deadline. So we are really running up on that deadline for how much time folks have to figure out what they're going to play. I'm really excited to jump into this pool. And also, one final note, do remember that as the 4th World Championships is happening, this is the first tournament to qualify for the 5th World Championship in 2026. So if you're interested in qualifying for that, this is your first chance to do so. So get to brewing, get to playing. Looking forward to seeing how people cook up their plane decks and how planes cause people to adjust how they build their main decks. Until the start of the tournament, hope y'all are excited about Planechase, excited about the World Championships, and excited about our first ever 2-set rotation coming in May. And I will see you all in the Revolution chat, eagerly talking about all of the fun things we have this month. Take care, y'all.